Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, I am talking with Keith Law of The Athletic all about his Dodgers top prospects list, who made it, who didn't, and what can we look forward to as Dodger fans in the future. It's always one of my favorite episodes of the year, so I'm looking forward to it. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you to our everydayers for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. My name is Jeff Snyder. My normal co-host is Vince Samperio, although it's just me today. Well, not just me, but I'm the only host today. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And with that said, I said get started. Let's get started. This is a fun episode, as I said at the beginning. I think this might be 4 straight years that I've had Keith Law from The Athletic here talking prospects with us. And so without further ado, if I can figure out all the right buttons to press, I am going to bring Keith in with me. And let's see. Hey, look, it's Keith Law. Keith, how are you?
Boop, beep, boop, 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 boop. Yes.
I really need a producer,
Clearly. I mean, so do I. So I'm no one to criticize.
We all need a producer.
Do any of this myself. Yeah. I got to say, so we've been doing this 4 years. We've got to have known each other. Is it 10?
We
it's
met
a long time.
We met at the winter meetings in 2015 in Nashville.
Okay. I think we might have even communicated.
We communicated a lot on Twitter before that. Too. Yeah. So, I know when I actually met you in person the first time, I introduced myself, said, "Hey, I'm Jeff Snyder." And he said, "Oh, Snydog." And so I was like, "Hey, Keith Law knows who I am." So
yes, I do.
Yeah, that was Nashville in 2015, my first winter meetings. And we've been, I don't know if we're friends. We're friendly anyway.
Call us friends. Certainly.
We're friends. This is my friend Keith Law.
We have talked many times.
For sure.
So yes, it's good to be back. I enjoy
Thanks.
doing this.
I appreciate it. And I've been meaning to get you on and I appreciate you reaching out. You kind of looked, you're like, wait, Jeff should have reached out to me by now. And I'm like, I agree. I should have reached out to you by now. So, so this will be fun. So it's a weird year for Dodgers prospects because there's probably 10 or 11 different guys who made some list or another. And I feel like more than most years, at least for the Dodgers, there's not a whole lot of consensus on who the top guys are. And I guess I won't ask you to tell what anybody else is thinking, but what's your kind of approach when you're putting together a list that might explain, at least in some part, why you see things differently than other people do?
What I always try to do, I can only speak to my own process. I understand that's what you're saying. I'm trying to answer the question. And my process always includes, my own observations, first and foremost, or I see players whenever I can. I have access to some minor league data, some minor league video. I speak to a large number of scouts from across the majors. I speak to some analysts as well who work for front offices. I speak to directors and even some people above the director position. I also speak to somebody in every front office just about their own players. Usually it's player development director, but that can vary by team based on who wants to talk, who might have the best information, people I have existing relationships with. So at the end of the day, I always say, these are my opinions. I'm putting my name on it. I don't quote scouts. I don't put other people's names on it or say, well, so-and-so told me X. But I do try to always, as I said, make sure that it's ultimately my opinion, but it is reflective of what's going on in the industry. And so I won't say what I did is exactly what the industry thinks, but I do think it reflects what the industry thinks with some modifications based on what I think. Sometimes I know I'm a little bit apart from the industry. I was the one person last year who raised the alarm and said, Colton Cowser doesn't hit lefties, and I don't think he hits off-speed stuff from righties all that well. And that turned out to be true, at least for the short term. That could change for the long term. In the short term, I was kind of the only one saying, I'm not seeing it. I don't see a star. I see a player, I see a big leaguer, but I don't see a star. And so there are definitely going to be times when I am differ from other lists, differ from the industry. I'm not trying to be contrarian. It's just those are the conclusions I come to myself through my own process.
Yeah, that makes sense. And last year, one of the guys who you kind of mentioned last year as a potential guy for your list, high on your list this year, was River Ryan. And I kind of want to break this into kind of 3 segments. I've got 2 guys on your list who you seem higher on than a lot of other people do. So talk about them in the first segment, and then the other 3 who are on your list who are kind of most lists somewhere. And then the last segment, I want to talk about a couple people who have been on your list in the past and didn't make it this year. So the 2 that you're a little bit higher on maybe are River Ryan and Josue De Paula. They are your top 2 Dodgers. And, both of them didn't even appear on some of the other lists. And both of them did appear on some others, but, they're not even consensus top 100 prospects. And yet for you, they are, what was it? 30. River Ryan's 33 and De Paula is 25. So I guess let's talk about De Paula first. Tell me what you love about Josue De Paula to put him up there at number 25.
Yeah, and this is the bat, right? I very, very much believe in the bat. He's just got an unbelievable feel for the strike zone, particularly for someone who's so young. I keep joking. The only time I've ever actually seen him play, all he did was walk multiple times. So clearly he's good at that based on sample size of, I think, 1 game. And he's got great bat speed. He's got that zone control. He recognizes pitch types. He recognizes balls and strikes. And that bore out in the batted ball data, the pitch data, and it bore out also in his overall stat line too. He's not much of a runner. He may just end up at first base. And if you want to make an argument against ranking him as highly as I did, it's that there's not going to be defensive value, certainly not on the defensive spectrum. You leave him in the outfield for now because he's 18 and you don't want to just rush him off to first base while the outfield is still a possibility. But even scouts I spoke to who really, really liked him said that body might end up at first base. I think the bat is special enough that he could be a star even if he is a first baseman. Of course, I'm hoping for a little something more than that.
Yeah, if you're slow when you're 18 years old and 185 pounds, chances are you're not going to be much faster when you're 26 and 215.
Doesn't get better, as it turns out. I can speak to, I'm 50 and I don't think I'm getting any faster.
Yeah. It happens to the best of us, Mother Nature, Father Time gets all of us. But the bat, so it's the bat, and that's it's exciting. And so really you're saying, if he was already a first baseman, he'd probably be lower on your list than he is.
Yes. I think in general, I have very few first basemen highly ranked on my top 100s ever, right? Because there's just the defensive value is just not there, right? That is the problem we keep running into, is that on the defensive spectrum, right? They are that is the least value other than DHs, and I basically never have DHs. I didn't have Jordan Alvarez on the top 100. I should have. Obviously, I should have. I knew he could hit.
DH.
He was DH with bad knees and kind of an older body. If you saw him, I saw him when he was 20. I think he was listed as 20 at that point, and I remember thinking, man, that's like what a 25-year-old, how a 25-year-old moves and how a 25-year-old is built. It was a very mature body at that point. And you think, that's not going to age great. He did have 2 knee surgeries. But the guy hits, right? He just hit. That was a good example of him. Yeah, just a little bit. And he hits it really, really hard. And so, I mean, to me, that's a good example of me. Yeah, kind of overthought it a little bit. That was a bit of a mistake. So, but yeah, to your point, De Paula would be lower if he were just a first base. If people were saying it's definitely first base only, he would have been lower. He would have still been on the list, but he would have been lower.
Awesome. Then there's River Ryan. Last year on your list, you actually you didn't have him, but you put him in. I think you in the honorable mentions or whatever. And something you said about him, I don't have the quote, but it was something along the lines of, by next year he could be a top 25 prospect. And at the time, he wasn't even a top 25 Dodgers prospect by most systems. And like, I was like, whoa, Keith sees something in him. He didn't quite get to the top 25, but he got to 33. And he is, higher on your list. I think somewhere, all the lists run together in my mind. Somebody has him, I think 19. But then other lists don't have him.
Might have been Eric.
Maybe
Fangraphs?
at Fangraphs, it might have
That
been.
just came to mind too. And of all the other lists, and trust me, I'm friends with all these guys. Jonathan Mayo and I were just talking the other day about one of the team lists that he was working on. Not so much for like, he wasn't asking advice, but he's like, where did you have so-and-so, et cetera. So
yeah,
it was, Eric and I probably tend to be the most similar, certainly in our approaches. Doesn't mean we have the same opinions on all players, but we do line up the most. So I think it was him.
So what is it about River Ryan that you saw last year and that you saw it as potential last year and that you saw come to fruition this over the past year?
Yeah, so this is a great example of came into the year with really good information from the team and from scouts who'd seen him the year before, who were, all sort of, whoa, this might be a guy. Because for folks who don't, I assume most of your listeners know who this is Dodgers podcast. They know River Ryan, right? He was a converted infielder. He pitched a little bit at UNC, Pembroke, I think it was. It's funny because I see their billboards. I live in Delaware. I see their billboards around here all the time because they're sort of a lower tuition school here. So they're trying to pull people from the north down there. And I'm like, you should just put River Ryan on the billboard, obviously. What bigger draw could you possibly have than
Absolutely.
that? River Ryan went to our school. And so the Dodgers traded for him because they had good reports from their amateur scout. Okay, scouts matter. Saying, no, this guy's a pitcher. He's a two-way guy, but really he belongs on the mound. They trade for him. They put him on the mound. He didn't pitch a ton that first year, but when he did, it was wow. And he's athletic as hell, like you'd expect a converted guy to be. I see him. So I come into the year with good notes. I'm over on the backfield in Glendale, like I often am in spring training. And I went there specifically to see Ryan, and it was unbelievable. It was like, holy, what the hell did I just walk into, right? You just don't expect to see guys like that unless you're at Dodgers camp, where that does tend to happen reasonably often. And it's 4 pitches. It's a good delivery. It's strikes. It's intent. It's aggressiveness. It's athleticism. You could see the upside. He's not a finished product. You saw that over the course of the year. Every single scout I talked to came in strong, mid-rotation starter or better. You can bet on a lot of future development because of the athleticism, because the body's good. He's got now stuff. So you're just talking about kind of rounding him into form in terms of better learning the art of being a starting pitcher who might go through a lineup 3 times, working on the delivery, working on durability. Of course, I wrote all of this. I knew he's hurt right now. I'm hoping it's nothing. You hate hearing that about obviously any pitching prospect, but coming into this year, it was universal acclaim. And I did actually have him originally a little bit higher in the top 100 when I circulated it to some front offices. The notes that came back were because he was basically in my top 25 or so, not to make my own prediction come true, but just because I really liked him. And the notes that came back were all, hey, we really like him too, but he's behind some of these other guys, probably because he's just not as advanced as a pitcher. He doesn't have the same experience. And so he doesn't demonstrate the same kind of feel that you'd hope to see in a pitching prospect, maybe in the top quarter of a top 100. And I was fine with that. So I slid him down to better reflect industry sentiment.
That makes sense. So you think there's a decent chance the Dodgers will end up winning the Matt Beatty trade?
Yeah. As bold predictions go, I try to be conservative, but I think I'm going to go out on a limb for that one.
Hey, Matt Beatty's been on this podcast almost many times as you have. If this is your 4th time, I think he's been on twice, but a great dude. But maybe his best contribution to the Dodgers might have been
River Ryan.
snagging us River Ryan. So
yes,
we'll take that. We're going to come back in a minute. We've got 3 other guys on Keith's top 100 list that we're going to talk about. So thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it locked on Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. It doesn't have to be a huge bet. Doesn't have to be a meaningful bet. Find something you're sure about. Bet $5 on it, and when you win, you will get $150 of bonus bets from FanDuel that you can use on some of those maybe riskier bets, the higher risk, bigger reward kind of bets, whatever you want to do, but go do it now. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Hey, I'm back with Keith Law. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Especially want to thank our everydayers. If you're not an everydayer, it's easy to become one. Just watch or listen every weekday morning. Also want to remind you, you can become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. And you can check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the two 24/7 streaming channels on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network, giving you the full breakdown in sports, whether you want the whole sports picture or specifically Los Angeles. There's something for you there. Jumping back in with Keith. Keith, we've talked about the first two Dodgers on your list.
Mm-hmm.
There's three more. There's kind of a big gap. River Ryan's at 33, and then there's nothing for the next 53 spots. And then right near in the last 15, you've got Dalton Rushing 86, Gavin Stone at 95, and Thayron Liranzo at 99. Dalton Rushing is kind of an interesting one. He hit like crazy his first year in the minors, a short year after he was drafted. And then last year, his first full season, he struggled. And something that was interesting to me, looking at his monthly splits,
Mm-hmm.
he was really good most of the season, but he was really bad in July and August because of the concussion that he got.
Yep.
How much of, you ended your write-up on Dalton Rushing by saying, I'm just a little more concerned about Rushing's bat than I was a year ago. How much do you have any feel for how much of the struggles were the concussion?
No. And it's a great question. And as I'm reading this too, did I not mention the concussion in there? That is an unforced error by me if I did not mention it, but I have my write-up in front of me just to make sure I know what I'm talking about, know what I was talking about. Looks like I don't see the word concussion in there.
I don't either.
That's pretty bad, actually. I apologize for that. He did have a concussion. And the answer is, of course, it had an impact. We just never know how much. I mean, I'll give another example from another organization. Gavin Cross was a top 100 prospect a year ago, top 10th overall pick, I think, by the Royals in 2022. Had a horrendous 2023. Well, it turned out he got a tick bite, developed Rocky Mountain spotted fever. I didn't think people still got that. And was just awful all year. And talking to multiple people, they said, he was exhausted. He was sick. They'd constantly give him days off because he couldn't get his energy back. He just write off the year. But it's also possible that he's just not as good as we thought he was. Like that happened. So how do you actually make that decision? Now, Cross was an easy guy to just take off the list because there was nothing positive in his year. And I noted on the Royals write-up, this guy could get right back there if he's healthy and he performs again. In Rushing, I just kind of backed up a little bit because, look, on the one hand, the timing of the slump certainly coincides well with the concussion. Not well, you know what I mean, right? It lines up cleanly for that. However, Rushing doesn't hit velocity particularly well. He's not awful. He's not overmatched by it. But this was a concern on him in college at Louisville, and it's a little bit of a concern now. Again, you could say the question, well, did he not hit velocity because he had the concussion and wasn't 100%? Yeah, maybe he should have just been sitting out for a month or more. Teams don't like to do that, but with concussions, we're not good at it. We're better than the NFL is, but we're not good at the concussion thing. Like, I think that's fair to say. And so, to me, that was the difference between maybe taking Rushing off the list and saying, no, I'm going to keep him somewhere towards the back of the list, acknowledge the concern I have, but I apologize, I didn't put it in the write-up, but acknowledge, at least in my process, some of this may be illusory because of the concussion issue. Now, I'll also add on top of that, this wasn't really part of my process, but just as we're talking here, if the one position where I would very, very much be concerned about concussions more than any other position is catchers, right? They are just prone to it. There's a lot of organic ways they can get concussions, a lot of stupid ways to get hit on a backswing, right? We've seen a bunch of guys have that happen.
Yeah.
And so one thing I'm not going to downgrade Rushing for this. I didn't. However, if I'm a Dodgers fan and I want to watch, that is the news I want the least for Rushing, right? I would rather find out he tore his UCL. I'm being very flip here, obviously, but you do not want a catcher with chronic concussions. That derails his career, also can kind of screw up his life.
Yeah.
So that would be the one thing to just keep an eye out for. Hopefully it's the last one. Hopefully Rushing comes out. He starts whacking velocity again, and that question is gone. Because you know what? If I felt like I had no questions about Rushing being able to hit 95 plus on a consistent basis, he's a top 50 prospect. And he might be there the next time I update this list at some point. And I think I usually do it in July because the draft is so late. But whenever I update the list, Like if Rushing comes out mashing and I can see he's hitting good fastballs again, he's going to be a top 50 guy. I don't even think that's much of a bold prediction.
Nice. So the defense, you think, can stick at catcher as long as the concussions don't keep piling up?
Absolutely. Everyone I talk to, they disagree on the actual degree of the catching. Nobody's moving him off catcher. He's fine.
Okay.
Some guys, he's fine. If he hits, you leave him a catcher. No one's moving him off. This isn't like Kevin Parada in the Mets system, where still a catcher, but I talked to a couple of scouts who said that's not going to work. And he's going to have to find another position, and then that puts pressure on the bat. A couple of guys said with Rushing, he can catch. It's not great, but the way he hits, you're not really going to care. Nobody said he can't catch. Those are the words I really, really hate to hear, because when a scout comes to me with that kind of conviction, they're not always right, but they're saying the probability.
There's a reason for the concern,
right? It's usually tied to something very specific. There are lots of things we look for in catching. And I will also say it's the thing I rely on my own eyes for the least. Catcher defense. I think you have to spend a lot of time watching an individual catcher to really evaluate his glove. And the way my job works, I generally don't get to do that. So I lean on the opinions of others.
Nice. While we're talking about catchers, let's jump down to number 99, Thayron Liranzo. First time on your list. He did make several lists, not all of them, but he is a guy who kind of came out of nowhere. What do you like about Thayron Liranzo?
Yeah, guy can hit, huh? He really hit. He hits it really hard. And he did punch, swing, and miss a bit. He's super young for playing in low A. Like I think in the pre-pandemic era, that guy probably starts an extended, goes to short season. They wouldn't have seen a need to rush him. And in his case, they've actually worked out in his favor. I think the majority of guys who get rushed, it doesn't. But in his case, look at what he was able to show us. And I even said in the write-up, this guy might hit 30 homers a year as a catcher. That's probably going to put you on a top 100, especially because I believe he can hit enough to get to it. Now, he's a guy where there's questions about whether he stays behind the plate. He's a big guy. He is not super fluid in any of his actions, receiving, blocking, throwing. It's going to take some work. Dodgers have a great player development organization. So again, taking off my prospect hat, putting on a Dodger fan hat for the moment. You loaned me one for the purposes of the podcast.
It's a good looking hat.
Thank you. I think that they'll get him there, right? If he doesn't get traded, obviously, they will develop him into enough of a catcher that either he ends up in their line of, this guy's a future catcher for us, or ends up somebody who's a good enough catcher that it boosts his trade value. And I happen to know other teams were after him in some of the trade talks, and they were engaged in a lot of trade talks this winter. Liranzo's caught everyone's eye. He's a guy that they were getting hit on, and he's a guy, my understanding is they were reluctant to part with because I think they see there's pretty big upside here. I mean, I would bet on his upside more than Rushing's, but there's a lot lower probability. He may not be a catcher. He does swing and miss a lot more, and it's possible he will be just kind of a power over hit guy, and maybe that's a backup if he stays behind the plate. There's a lot of ifs with him. We don't really have as many of those ifs with Rushing, which is why I had Rushing ranked higher, and why, I think you could see there's quite a bit of separation between them in the system. Rushing could potentially see the majors at some point this year if there's an opportunity. Liranzo's probably 3 years out.
That makes sense. We're going to come back in a minute. There's one more guy on Keith's list we're going to talk about, and then a couple guys who didn't make the list. So thanks again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Logix Banking. You know how on this show you get a lot of in-depth analysis, maybe even some hot takes once in a while? Well, let me give you my hottest take of the day. The best lineup in LA right now is the lineup of auto loans at Logix. They start off at the top with my favorites, the proven and dependable new and used vehicle loans. You can count on these guys to give you low rates and save you big time bucks. Next up, they've got an exciting new rookie sensation in their electric vehicle loans with super low rates and flexible payment terms. Rounding out their lineup, they've got their auto refinancing loans and lease buyout loans. With these guys, you could lower your monthly payments and get on the road to owning your car faster. Look, I know it's a hot take, but seriously, no one can beat the lineup at Logix. Visit your local Logix branch right here in LA and surrounding areas and let one of their amazing team members help you, or just apply online in minutes at logixbanking.com/car. That's LOGIX banking.com/car. Hey, we're back. Thanks again for making us your first listen. I'm here with Keith Law. Remember to become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers, become an everydayer by watching and listening every weekday morning, and check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles, the 24/7 streaming channels over on YouTube from the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, Keith, we got 3 more guys I want to talk about. The last guy on your list, who isn't actually the last Dodger on your list, but the last in the order of we're going to talk about him, is Gavin Stone, who has some similarities to Dalton Rushing in that he was higher on your list last year and dropped down because of some struggles in 2023. Stone, the big issue, he's at number 95 on your list. The big issue was he debuted in the big leagues and was lousy. And specifically his changeup, which was, elite in the minor leagues, got knocked around in the big leagues. And now there is some thought that maybe he was tipping that pitch. And so maybe that was the issue. But the concerns were enough that you dropped him quite a bit on your list down to 95. What are your thoughts on Gavin Stone heading into 2024?
I do think and hope I was making a bit of a statement by keeping him on the list too, saying I still think he's going to be fine. I do believe the pitch tipping argument. I think it's borne out by watching him. I think it's borne out in some of the data. It's really hard to believe that a pitch could miss bats 50% of the time in the minors and then come up in the majors and get hit hard almost that frequently. It is such a stark turnaround. You don't really see that happen. Like I'm very hard pressed to think of an example of something like that, especially for a pitch that everyone agreed was probably a grade 70 offering. And so I think he's going to be fine ultimately. Look, when he gets back to the majors this year, and he will get back to the majors this year at some point, hopefully he can just kind of erase what happened last year, that the memory of struggling like that doesn't affect him. That does, these players are human for now, at least. And so that is a possibility, but I still believe it is enough fastball, enough changeup, more than enough changeup. And he's got really good field to pitch. He had really good field to pitch. But you take away a guy's best weapon by far, it's awfully hard for him to compensate. And not only did they take it away, but because hitters knew it was coming, it made the changeup was coming. It made the fastball less effective too. Because if they could see it, it's not the changeup, but it's probably the fastball. And his fastball's fine, but it's not elite. It's not going to miss bats on its own. So I do still believe he's a starter. I do think even potentially a mid-rotation starter. I moved him down substantially to acknowledge that risk, but I was pretty determined at the end of things to say, no, I'm taking this guy over a lot of other pitching prospects still in the minors. Many of them also project as starters and might be in the next 20 or 30 names. I still believe that Stone is not only going to succeed in the majors, but succeed enough to merit his spot on the list ahead of many other names in other organizations who I also do think are major league starters.
That's awesome. I'm a big Gavin Stone fan. Our everydayers know I'm a sucker for a good changeup. And one of the fun things about the Dodgers right now, you've got Gavin Stone's changeup. You've got, they traded Ryan Pepio. He's got the changeup. They got Bobby Miller, who has a great changeup. They have Kyle Hurt, who has a great changeup. There's a lot of fun changeup among young Dodger pitchers. And I'm still hopeful that Gavin Stone is going to turn it around, because it's fun to watch. He struck out Fernando Tatis the other day with that changeup, and it was ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm glad it's 2 innings so far in spring training, but I was glad to see he looks right again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And there were signs at the end of last season that he had turned things around with the Dodgers in the big leagues. He pitched better at the end of the season, to the point where there was even, at least among fans, like, he might actually earn a postseason roster spot.
Right.
And so, hopefully, fingers crossed that that's going to be the case.
Yes. Absolutely.
There's 2 guys who were on your list last year. One very, very high, Diego Cartaya, formerly the Dodgers' top prospect, probably consensus top prospect, especially once, Bobby Miller graduated. Diego Cartaya was the guy, and now he's not on your list. He didn't make a few other. He still made some lists. He kind of got the Dalton Rushing treatment on some lists. Drop him way down, but we still think he's got a chance. What's your thinking on Cartaya?
I want to be wrong on this one. I want him to come out. Maybe they send him back to Double-A. He's still 22, right? It's fine to send him back there. Come out and mash. Just show us it was just a blip. I really want to be wrong on this one. I would rather have been right a year ago than be right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There was just no justifying it. He was on early drafts of the top 100, and not only did industry sources, like especially front office guys who have info on the entire minor leagues, sort of encouraged me to push him a little bit down or even off the list. As I worked with other names too, there's a bit of a pairwise comparison for folks who have that kind of coding background, know what that is. Like, do I want Cartaya or do I want Liranzo? Do I want Cartaya or do I want Drew Gilbert? Like, who would I'm a GM. I'm time horizons, I'm a rebuilding GM. So I'm looking for prospects. Who am I taking? Damn it. I worked the way down the list and suddenly you realize Cartaya he's not over any of these guys on the top 100. I wouldn't take him in a trade over any of these guys based on what happened last year. And by that, I mean, first of all, he didn't hit at all. And there really wasn't anything even in the underlying data that made me feel a whole lot better about the poor performance. It was just a bad year. But the only thing he showed was he still got the huge power. Well, no kidding. But a lot of guys have that. That's not that exciting anymore. So that was an issue. The catching was better, but not a lot. And this guy was obviously his value in the majors was never going to be as a defense first catcher. The hope was there's a guy who stays behind the plate and he just hits across the board, average on base power. That guy wasn't really in evidence last year. There wasn't some explanation like an underlying injury, a concussion, or something else like that. I asked a lot of people and we just don't know. We don't know what
how to hit.
Right? That's a little scary, honestly. Yeah. And the most damning comment I got from anybody, and I won't say anything about his role necessarily, but he'd seen Cartaya a bunch last year. He said, I just don't think he's going to be a star anymore. Well, that hurts, right? Not only are you saying, it's one thing to say the guy's floor might be a lot lower than we thought. Maybe he's not a catcher. Maybe he doesn't hit enough to be a big leaguer or something like that. But to cut off the ceiling, to cut off the top, wow, that hurts because I'm really trying to get at the stars on the top 100. There's some floor guys, obviously, because I'm trying to rank them correctly as much as I can. But to hear that the chances of Cartaya becoming a star are really pretty small, if not zero, that was like upsetting on a level because I was so in on him a year earlier. And I get invested in these guys. I want them all to succeed.
Yeah.
But if I said really nice things about you, it's pretty good if I see you succeed. I like that.
Yeah. All right. Last guy, quickly, we're running out of time. Andy Pajes. I think this is the third straight year you and I have talked about him.
Yeah.
And he's not on your list this year. He did improve his physical conditioning a lot last year, and he's on the Dodgers 40-man roster now. He's looking good in spring training in a small sample so far. Probably going to debut this year. Was he on any drafts of your top 100 this year?
No, none of the ones that I circulated. I will say in my mind, when I first start doing this, before I even start listing them, he's probably going to be on there, right? He's been on there the last 2 years. So why wouldn't he be on there? I think he was on, the last 2 years he was. So it's not like I don't like the guy, but he played just a little bit and then he got hurt and he had shoulder surgery, which can linger, right? We'll see what the swing looks like going forward too. He was not great in AA in 2022, went back to that level, hit well, but then got hurt, didn't get the chance to get promoted, didn't get the chance to continue producing, lost a lot of at-bats that I think he just needs to continue developing. I still think he can be an everyday player, but I think his probability went down. And one big concern is just, we see a lot of these guys, they come off the shoulder injury and they're not 100%. This was a big part of the story of Drew Jones in the Diamondback system, where folks who saw him in spring training, I think I saw one at-bat, so I wouldn't take anything from that. But folks were coming out saying, man, he looks terrible. How is this guy the second pick in the drafts? It's major shoulder surgery just 7 months prior. So you got to at least take that into account. So I am taking that into account with Pajes. It is possible he belonged on the top 100, but I was considering the possibility that, hey, he may end up losing about a year of playing time, quality reps in the process, and that may further hold him back and hold down his ceiling because of the lost development time. Again, completely hope I'm wrong. Just trying to be a little bit realistic here.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. I think that'll do it for us today. Thank you, Keith. I always appreciate these chats. Always fun. If things change drastically by July, maybe we'll get you on mid-season. We haven't done that yet. We've always just done the off-season one. So
one thing I can promise you, the Dodgers are always interesting in the draft, whether I agree with it or not. Like last year, I didn't like their draft, but it was interesting. It was plenty to talk about.
Absolutely. Well, we'll keep that in mind. Thank you all to all our listeners, our everydayers. Thanks for making us your first listen. Be sure to become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. Check out Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Sports Los Angeles over on YouTube. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at Vince91. I'm on Twitter at Snydog, and Keith is on Twitter at Keith Law. You can email us, lockedondodgers@gmail.com. or send us a voicemail or a text message at 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow or on Monday, I guess.